Thank you. Thank you. So, how much of your advertising spend is actually impacting user behavior? That's really what we will try to answer today. And for this, we're going to be talking about incrementality and how you can really prove the real value of your user acquisition and retargeting channels. So before I get started, can you please raise your hand if you are or have been running an incrementality test in the past 3 months? Okay, so I would say a good half of you. So if you did not raise your hand, don't worry. I'll be focusing the first 5 minutes of the presentation talking to you about what is incrementality and why it is important. And if you did raise your hand, we're going to be spending the remaining 15 minutes actually talking about how you can bring this measurement to the next level. By the way, I'm Clement. I'm Chief Operating Officer at Adikteev, so in charge of our operations for our app retargeting and CTV user acquisition business. I've been in the industry for 10 years now, which either makes me slightly old or means that I'm becoming an expert. You choose. Talking about expertise, at Adikteev, we didn't wait for incrementality to become a buzzword to actually focus on it. We were probably the first vendor to actually talk about it publicly back in 2018. So here's a picture of my colleagues talking about incrementality on stage. Since then, we run hundreds of incrementality tests, both for retargeting or CTV user acquisition. And we've spent 8 years developing, improving, refining our incrementality methodology. Let's get started. Incrementality is becoming a hot topic again. And what is incrementality? You probably know that it's how much of your app growth is truly driven by advertising versus what would have happened naturally without ads. The way I like to phrase incrementality, I see it as the difference between spending to look good on dashboards and spending to truly grow the business. Spending to look good on dashboards versus spending to truly grow the business. It's super important because as mobile marketers, it's really the validation of our work. How much do we actually contribute to the growth of the apps we are working for? And it matters now more than ever because we've talked about the fact that we are in turbulent times, that UA is becoming increasingly complex. There are more options of channels. There is rewarded UA that's on the rise, CTV as well, plenty of options. And at the same time, traditional attribution models are becoming weaker due to IDFA deprecation and due to cross-device measurement that is a challenge. Now, if you don't know about incrementality, let me try to explain it to you in 1 minute. Incrementality is basically an A/B test, so comparison between two groups of people. Some who see ads, we call them the test group, and some who don't see ads, we call them the control group. What are we looking for? We are looking for a lift, an improvement, a difference in behavior between those two groups. So we expect to see a change in behavior in the group that is actually seeing ads versus the one who is not. In my example here, 30%. This difference should be statistically significant. What does it mean? It means that the difference is big enough that it ensures the results are real and not due to random chance. Then, what do you measure? Well, it depends on your goal. For user acquisition, you will probably be measuring differences in number of installs. If you are doing retargeting, you will probably be measuring the difference in terms of number of opens or revenue. Let's assume I convince you to look at incrementality. There are 3 ways you can do it. You can first rely on your internal data team. It's great because they work in the same company as you do, so there is an alignment of interest. And you will be able to customize the methodology because it's proprietary. On the negative side, it definitely requires a lot of skills and expertise, and it takes bandwidth. It takes a lot of time to work on that, so it needs to be identified as a priority within your company. Alternatively, you can rely on a third party, a measurement company. Usually those are independent, obviously, as a third party, and they are measurement experts. So they will come up with an advanced methodology for measurement. On the flip side, it's going to come with a cost associated to the service. Fortunately, they don't work for free. It takes time. Why is that? Because obviously you need to sign a contract with those companies, start to share the data with them, and then you launch the test. So obviously you're looking at a couple of weeks or months before you get started. And finally, it's their methodology, so you don't control it. And sometimes it can be a bit complex, a bit of a black box. Finally, you can also rely on your advertising partner. It's great because most partners will offer it for free. It's cool because it's fast to implement. The partner will already have their methodology ready to be deployed on the campaign. On the flip side, there could be an incentive bias for the advertising partner to show good results. And you don't control the methodology, so it might not be comparable with how you do incrementality on other channels. Now, if you are running incrementality, there are a couple of challenges that come with it. At Adikteev, we like to take a scientific approach. So what we did when building and analyzing methodologies is we looked at what is done in the pharmaceutical industry. Why? Because it's one of the most regulated industry. And as you can guess, before a new cure or new treatment comes into the market, it needs to go through heavy testing. So let's use this comparison to look at what are the classic biases of incrementality testing. First of all, you will have patients that are not treated despite being in the test group. So some patients do not receive the treatment at all, even if they are in the test group. In advertising, this happens because you cannot ensure that you will be able to reach all users, so there will be no impressions on some users. Second issue is inconsistent dosage. So some patients will actually receive the treatment only once, other will receive it 3 times, other will receive it 10 times. It happens in advertising because we cannot guarantee that all users will see the same number of impressions. Then there is the issue of additional treatments. So some patients will receive other treatments on top of the treatment you are trying to evaluate. In advertising, it happens because you can't pause all other channels when you're doing an incrementality test, so those will actually interfere in your results. And finally, there could be inconsistency in test groups. It means that some patients will actually leave the experiment before it ends, while others will actually step in during the course of the experiment. This in advertising happens if you are using dynamic audiences that refreshes, which means that user will come and go from your experiment at any time. So how can we mitigate those? There's a lot to be said, but let me just break down a short checklist for you. First of all, you need to make sure that those both groups are actually comparable. So ensure they have similar characteristics, same percentage of payers, same average revenue per user, same conversion rates. Then you need to make sure that there is no major product change, App Store featuring upcoming that would bias your results, that there will be also limited changes of spend on the other channels, and that you are not at a peak seasonality that will impact the results. Finally, you need to allocate sufficient budget and time for your test, and you need to make sure that the population is going to stay stable throughout the test. Second big issue of incrementality is please don't use it as an always-on metric. And this for 3 reasons. First one, because it's too volatile. If you look at it on a daily or weekly basis, incrementality results are going to fluctuate. 1 week is going to be bad, the next week is going to be amazing, the third week is going to be okay, and then you're not going to know what to do with the results. So you need to zoom out and look at a longer time frame. Second issue, incrementality is a high-level metric. It's a snapshot, and it's actually too broad. What I mean by that is that you cannot rely on incrementality for your granular campaign optimization. You can't do creative or publisher optimization with incrementality. You need to rely on another daily KPI, such as return on ad spend or CPA. Finally, and probably most importantly, the third reason is opportunity cost. If you're having permanently a 30% control group, it means that you are actually losing potential revenue from this group during the whole period. So please avoid losing revenue with an always-on control group. So if we don't measure incrementality always on, when do we measure incrementality? The first answer is when you want to compare different channels and improve your budget allocation. So what you should do is compare incrementality level across different channels, starting with where you spend the most. Start where the money is. What you should not do, on the contrary, is start by looking at incrementality at a small, very specific new partner that you're adding. You should also measure incrementality once performance has stabilized and not when you launch a new activity, because you want the results to be already a bit mature. You also want to reassess incrementality when your budget changes significantly, because obviously you won't have the same results with a low budget versus when your budget actually triples. Finally, you want to assess incrementality when your strategy or the market condition actually change. For instance, with the introduction of ATT, it totally changed the way most advertising partners operate, so you need to reassess in that case. Final issue with incrementality is how do we interpret the results? It's not that simple. We are always looking for a positive list, positive results, but what does it mean? It actually means that your current channel, your strategy on this channel, the partners you are using on this channel, and the scale at which you're using them actually brings value for your business. The combination of those four is actually correct. If your results are not positive, it should not mean that you stop everything. It means that you need to iterate and that either one or several of those four are actually wrong. Let me give you some examples. Maybe your strategy is not incremental. For instance, with retargeting, maybe retargeting lapsed users who've not been active recently brings benefit to your business, but maybe retargeting super active users does not. Also, a partner may actually be incremental at the current spend level, but it may not be anymore if you were to double or triple the budget. Now that we've seen the challenges, let's see how we can bring incrementality to the next level. For that, we'll look at how the biggest spender in the industry actually leverage this metric. And for this, I'll introduce the concept of adjusted ROAS. So what is adjusted ROAS? It actually depends if you're doing user acquisition or retargeting. But it's pretty simple. For user acquisition, you start by running an incrementality test periodically, and then you use those results to actually adjust your target and reallocate your budget. For retargeting, it's slightly different. You know the audience, actually, so you can start by analyzing the organic behavior. How does your audience behave without ads? And then you're going to use those results to actually adjust your targets. So let's break it down, starting with user acquisition. Let's assume you did all the rest correctly and you come up with those results. So for channel 1, you measured that it's 50% incremental, 50% positive, that's great. Channel 2 is also incremental, but 10% incremental. So what the biggest spenders would do in that case is they would keep or even lower the existing ROAS target for channel 1. And for channel 2, that is actually less incremental, they will increase their ROAS target. So basically making it harder to reach. So what's it going to do? as targets are harder to reach on channel 2, they will probably be spending less there. So it's going to naturally move budget away from channel 2, the less incremental, to channel 1, the most incremental. So the key message here is you need to set your goals for each channel depending on the incrementality level that you're seeing. Now, for retargeting, we said you need to start by analyzing the organic behavior. What we like to do at Adikteev is to look at what we call the return rate. So basically, what is the percentage of users who are actually coming back to your app, depending on how long they've been inactive. So in this example, we have 50% of users who are actually coming back if they've been inactive for 2 days. Then we are going to leverage those results to adjust our targets. So we know for this audience of 2 days inactive that 50% is kind of the organic behavior. 50% of them come back naturally without ads. So everything that goes beyond that is actually the impact of retargeting. So assuming your initial ROAS target was 100%, you take into account this return rate and you adjust your target. To try to make it very simple, if half of your audience is actually returning naturally, it probably means that for this specific audience, you need to double your target. The key message here is the goals for retargeting should be based on the organic rate of return. Let me end with a couple of takeaways. First of all, remember that incrementality is actually here to prove the real value of your work. Said differently, attribution is to know who clicked. Incrementality is to know what changed. Please avoid always-on measurement, but rather measure on your biggest channels and reassess in case of a major change, either of budget, strategy, or market conditions. And finally, remember this adjusted ROAS concept. First, you measure incrementality on your channels, or you look at your organic behavior in case of retargeting. And then you adjust your ROAS target up or down, depending on the incrementality level that you're seeing. So incrementality is not going to make your advertising easier, but it's going to make it smarter. Thank you.